Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Freed Palestinians receive a hero's welcome. Al-Shebab vows retaliation against Kenyan troops advancing into Somalia. And Saleh's armed thugs unleashed on peaceful Yemeni protesters. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
ونستهل جولتنا من حيث بدأ اليوم تنفيذ المرحلة الأولى من عملية.
The first phase of the Egyptian-mediated prisoner exchange deal between Israel and the Hamas movement was completed as Hamas released Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in exchange for Israel's release of 477 Palestinian prisoners.
وذلك من إجمالي 1027 أسيرا سيتم.
A total of 1,027 Palestinian prisoners will be released, with the remaining set to be released at a later date. As part of the deal, the occupation's authorities released 119 from the West Bank, including 16 Jerusalemites, 5 from inside the Green Line, and 1 prisoner from the occupied Syrian Golan. Shabar al-Budeiri reports from the first phase of the Palestinian prisoners' release.
The night settled and a new dawn emerged. Those aboard these buses have waited over 5 years for this day. For the first time in these exchange deals, a new dawn emerges inside the Green Line and occupied Jerusalem. 16 prisoners left an Israeli police station in Jerusalem to return to their homes. Joy prevails despite having to endure the deportation of dozens of people to the Gaza Strip and diaspora. But even outside prison bars, the occupation soldiers were monitoring them, as if the prisoners have to be reminded that they are leaving a small prison and entering a bigger prison. In an exceptional scene on a historic day, the leadership of the Fatah and Hamas movements stood together in the Palestinian Authority's headquarters in Ramallah to welcome 96 male prisoners and 23 female prisoners, despite the deportation of dozens of others.
Palestinian division led to leaving female prisoners in jail. Also, my message to the leadership is that the prisoners' struggle must be one of their top priorities.
The joy of freedom and fear and sadness for the female prisoners' comrades.
My feelings are those of the people, the feeling of the resistance's victory. I feel like all free people around the world.
Behind each prisoner is a story that gives rise to goosebumps. Who is he? Who is he? Who is he?
This is my son. He brings me honor. His son goes to school. This is the first time I've hugged him. The very first time I've hugged him. But like I told you, for the sake of the flag, for the sake of Palestine, and for the sake of Jerusalem, we are willing to give up everything.
As for the politicians, they recalled that prisoners are the ones who signed the reconciliation agreement and pledged to work on the release of over 5,000 prisoners.
We have an agreement with the Israeli government for the release of another group that will be similar to this one. God willing, it will take place after this phase is over. We demand that they fulfill their pledge if they have respect for their pledges.
The first phase began and ended on Palestinian land, and despite the different opinions, it was the spark for the appearance of the dawn of freedom for hundreds of prisoners and the unification of the National Front. But they leave behind fathers and sons who are waiting for that same dawn. Shabar al-Budeiri, Al Jazeera, occupied Ramallah.
Celebrations also swept across the Gaza Strip to mark the release of Palestinian prisoners from the Israeli occupation's prisons. Many popular events were organized to celebrate the success of the first phase of the prisoner exchange deal between Israel and the Hamas movement. In exchange, the Azz-ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, vowed to continue the jihad, or struggle, until the liberation of all Palestinian prisoners from the Israeli occupation's prisons.
After 1,941 days in Hamas captivity, First Sergeant Gilad Shalit is free at last. These are the first moments that Shalit was seen as he was delivered by his captors to the Egyptian border. Later, Shalit was transferred to an IDF base in the south, where he dressed in a new IDF uniform, and at this hour, Gilad Shalit is arriving safely back home in Mitzpeh Hilah. Well, minutes after leaving Gaza, willingly or not, a clearly nervous Gilad Shalit gave his first interview to Egyptian television. Looking tired and dazed, Shalit hesitated as he replied to questions. Speaking in Hebrew, Shalit told the Egyptian reporter that he was treated well by his Hamas captors and feels in good health. Shalit said that he hoped that his release in exchange for Palestinians held in Israeli prisons would lead to peace between the two peoples. Questioned about whether he will campaign for the release of 4,000 Palestinian prisoners still in Israeli prisons, Shalit said that he would be happy if all prisoners return home, but only if they do not return to terror. Shalit said that he was told a week ago that his release was imminent. He also said that until that time, he thought that he might be held in captivity for years to come. When asked what he missed most, he said that it was his family and friends. He then added that he missed talking to people and was looking forward to not sitting alone in a room all day. Nowhere is there more excitement and anticipation for the return of Gilad Shalit than in his hometown of Mitzpeh Hilah. Reporter Ariel Reshef spent the day at the village where she spoke with neighbors and with the head of the Free Gilad Shalit campaign.
The preparations for Gilad Shalit's return have been well underway for days, but this very moment is the time that everyone here in Mitzpeh Hilah and indeed in Israel have been looking forward to. They say that this is one of the most exciting days they can remember in recent history, and it's brought most people here to tears. They also say that they understand that this came with a heavy price tag. 1,027 terrorists will be released from Israeli prisons in order to free Gilad Shalit. How do you feel today?
Extremely excited and happy, and also remembering the families of, the families that are not so happy today, and embracing them, and loving everybody, and just connecting, really connected to this nation who did such a huge thing.
You're a resident here in Mitzpeh Hilah. Do you know the Shalit family personally?
Yes, I know the family. I don't know Gilad personally. I only met him in my dreams, but I do know the family. Yeah.
Have you seen a change in the sort of atmosphere here in Mitzpeh Hilah since the news of Gilad's imminent release came out?
Yeah, totally. It was like a huge, everybody could breathe all of a sudden, and a lot of expectation, and also worrying. Now that we know that he's back home, we're really relieved. But it was few very sensitive days.
When you saw those first pictures, what was your first thought?
He's so skinny. My heart broke. I was just sobbing. But he's alive, like he's here, he's alive, we can touch him really soon.
Why do you think it's so important to the Israeli public to see just one soldier come back alive, as opposed to these 1,027 prisoners that are going to be released?
Because Israel is a very unique nation, and what we're fighting for is not the life of one person. We're fighting for our right to be who we are. We are a nation that sanctifies life, and that's what we do, and it's not a matter of one life, or more than that. It's who we choose to be in the face of the situation, and nothing and nobody is going to make us not honor life, and that's the great pride. I think that's the great achievement and accomplishment here.
Thank you very much.
That I hardly can speak because most of the time I'm crying a little bit. After a more than 5 years that we were fighting, almost kind of fighting for not only for releasing Gilad, but for a value that you never leave someone behind. And that's the secret power of the Israeli society that have to fight for her independence so many years. And I think we did something today historical. It is a historical event. But at least the Prime Minister, that everything was dependent on him, took the right decision like a real leader. That's what we asked him all the time. And there is no price for this kind of thing.
A booby-trapped car exploded in the Somali capital, Mogadishu, today. The attack coincided with a visit by 2 Kenyan ministers to the country. No immediate reports of casualties were available. Al-Shabab movement sent reinforcements to the southern Somali border in an attempt to counter the Kenyan forces that crossed the border in pursuit of al-Shabab fighters.
Kenyan troops backed by Somali government forces and their militias continue to launch military operations in southern Somalia in an attempt to pursue armed fighters of Al-Shebab Islamic movement, which is known to have ties with Al-Qaeda. The objective is to restrain the movement and push its fighters further away from the southern Somali-Kenyan borders.
Kenyan government As I said earlier, the Kenyan government has every right to defend itself and protect its citizens and territory. Al-Shabaab fighters were the ones to start the aggression on Kenyan territory. It is not wrong for Kenya to defend its people and territory.
The Kenyan decision to cross Somali borders came after the kidnapping of 2 European female tourists from a resort area in northern Kenya, as well as 2 UN relief workers. Despite the danger associated with Kenya's meddling in the Somali civil conflict that has been raging for 2 decades, the Kenyan public expressed support for its government, which depends on proceeds from foreign investment and tourism, and which requires a high level of security that is currently being threatened by al-Shabaab operations.
It was high time for the government to show the al-Shabaab.
It's time for our government to show the al-Shabaab movement, and not the good people of Somalia, that they are serious and they will not allow this threat to continue. We will capture them and stop their activities.
We will capture you and we will make sure that we stop your activities.
Al-Shabaab movement's threats of carrying out vengeance must be taken into consideration. However, the movement's justification to carry out vengeance over breaching Somali sovereignty did not find support, not even among Somalis.
It's a positive step.
Pursuing al-Shabaab is a positive step. They are a common enemy. It's not a Somali-Kenyan conflict. It's a confrontation against an international enemy which we must fight against.
And fight against this kind of...
On the ground, incoming reports confirm that dozens of Kenyan military vehicles continue to cross Somali borders, following 2 airstrikes launched by Kenyan warplanes on 2 al-Shabaab bases. The coming days will reveal the nature of the resistance that al-Shabaab movement is planning to adopt, and whether it will be waged on Somali soil or in the heart of the Kenyan territory. Nasser Farghali, BBC.
Our correspondent in Yemen said 5 people were killed and dozens were injured when those described as thugs and forces loyal to President Ali Abdullah Saleh opened fire on a march in Sana'a, demanding the downfall of the regime.
Our correspondent added that the Central Security Forces encircled the city and indiscriminately opened heavy fire.
مسلسل مستمر من التصعيد
The Yemeni president's forces continuously escalate their campaign with the announcement of every peaceful demonstration sweeping across the capital. On Al-Kai Street in Sana'a, a stream of bullets from Saleh's loyalist forces and those described as thugs terrorized the participants of a massive demonstration chanting for the downfall of the regime. The field hospital, with its limited capacity, was packed with dozens of killed and wounded people. Its side rooms were also filled with victims and those who came to bid them farewell.
ومن جاء لتوديعهم.
The demonstration, which was earlier announced by the youth of the revolution, was one of two marches that took off from Change Square to the streets of the capital, and was accompanied by cameras and media networks to prove its peacefulness, or so the revolutionaries say. This has been a particularly bloody week, during which Saleh's regime attempted to dissuade revolutionaries from continuing the revolution and voicing their demands. Meanwhile, there's no sign indicating that either side will back down.
We arrived at the demonstration chanting peaceful, peaceful, and we threw flowers at the Republican Guards and the Central Forces. However, they attacked us from behind as soon as we started marching.
نيران المدافع والقذائف لم تطل ساحات شباب الثورة فحسب.
Artillery and rocket fire targeted the squares where the youth of the revolution are rallying, as well as areas where those helping the revolution are located, such as the 1st Armored Division bases in the Hasaba area where the leader of the Hashid tribe is located. Not far from Sana'a, Ta'iz is also enduring a noisy night while its residential neighborhoods are shelled by Republican Guard tanks and artilleries, following the Guards' clashes with the forces supporting the revolution.
إعلان حرب شاملة هكذا وصفت قوات الجيش المساندة.
The military forces helping the revolution described the ongoing missile attacks and artillery shelling by the Yemeni president's forces as a declaration of full-on war. In addition, they say the declaration took effect when Saleh shared what they described as his council of war.
Yesterday's civilian death toll caused by the gunfire of Syrian regime forces rose to 35 after security and military operations were carried out in a number of Syrian regions. Meanwhile, the Arab League said it is waiting for an official Syrian response to the statement issued at the Arab foreign ministers' meeting.
The barbaric campaign launched by Assad's brigades against civilians demanding the downfall of the Syrian regime resulted in the death and injury of dozens. The General Authority of the Syrian Revolution announced that the death toll on the day of fulfillment to the Proud Duma rose to 35, including 23 in Homs, after thousands of citizens took part in funerals for those killed by the gunfire of Assad's brigades. The funerals turned into protests calling for the resignation of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. In Idlib province, 17 people were wounded in clashes between the security forces and gunmen, believed to be army defectors near the town of Hish in the countryside of Marat al-Naman. In Daraa, Assad's brigades, backed by bulldozers and military vehicles, raided the town of Harbat Ghazaleh and arrested a number of people. In Dir az-Zur, activists reported that violent clashes erupted between Syrian security forces and defected soldiers. Sources said a security car ran over and killed an unarmed citizen in the city's Azura neighborhood, while violent explosions and heavy machine gun fire was heard in the neighborhoods of Darib Alba, Bab Darib, Bab Siba'a, Nazihiyin, and Imraija. Military and security forces also stormed Bab Siba'a with dozens of tanks and military vehicles and imposed a siege in order to capture the nearly 50 defected soldiers, including a brigadier general. Assad's gunfire and brigades did not prevent the unarmed civilians from completing their protests. Thousands took to the streets denouncing the Arab League's call for dialogue between Assad's regime and the opposition within 15 days. The protesters also called for the recognition of the Syrian National Council, which was recently formed in Istanbul. Activists uploaded images of today's protests in the provinces of Idlib, Daraa, Hama, Aleppo, the countryside of Damascus, and others. Thousands participated in a massive demonstration in the city of Idlib, demanding the suspension of Syria's membership from the Arab League. In turn, Arab League Deputy Secretary General Ambassador Ahmed bin Haili said the League is waiting for an official Syrian response to the Arab statement issued at the Arab foreign ministers' meeting. Bin Haili expressed his anticipation of Damascus's response response to the Arab efforts, aimed at resolving the current crisis and establishing a Syrian national dialogue. He explained that the Arab League's Secretary General, Nabil al-Arabi, had a phone call with Syrian Foreign Minister Walid Muallim and briefed him on the outcome of the foreign minister's meeting.
The Occupy Wall Street protests have marked the one-month mark since a few hundred protesters in New York turned into thousands worldwide. Press TV's Gary Anthony Ramsey reports.
The one-month birthday celebrations for the Occupy Wall Street movement didn't look very different from other days in Zuccotti Park since September 16th. People were yelling, groups were discussing, and the police were watching. But 31 days ago, the people here were virtually alone in their movement. Now there are similar demonstrations all over the globe. Occupy sit-ins are in more than 100 cities in the United States, dozens of others worldwide. Miami became one of the newest municipalities to have to contend with the angry, unconventional national movement.
What I see here in Zuccotti Park is amazing. I see old people, young people, people of every description, grandmothers who would be standing at the kitchen sink washing the dishes. You're seeing an utter meltdown of the American middle class.
A new Quinnipiac poll shows that more than 67% of New Yorkers surveyed now support Occupy Wall Street protesters on the issue of banks, regulation, and the connection between Wall Street and government. You say it's going to grow?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay.
I think that people are complacent and have been for quite some time now. And as they're home watching it on the TV, maybe they'll stand up and come here more and more as the time goes on.
The same poll also says that 87% of New Yorkers surveyed believe the protesters should be allowed to stay here as long as they'd like, as long as they don't break the law. One small measurement of success for this movement is the amount of money collected in its war chest. On Friday, that number was $150,000. Today, it's over $300,000. Money donated by supporters of the Occupy Wall Street movement.
We're up against Wall Street, so we're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars. You can't even imagine. And we've taken in a couple $100,000 from small grassroots donors, families from Spokane to a little elderly couple in West Virginia that sent us some hand-knit, wool hats and apple butter from their farm. And it's amazing. The outpouring of support from the heartland and even abroad is part of what keeps us going here.
On Monday, many of the protesters here seem to be resting from the turbulent activity over the weekend. For some, just being here was celebration enough for being here longer than many people expected. Gary Anthony Ramsey, Press TV, New York.
The Iraqi Ministry of Women's Affairs held a ceremony to mark the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, especially after official data indicated that approximately 25% of the Iraqi population is under the poverty line. At the ceremony, the ministry unveiled the government's 5-step plan to improve the living standards of the poor, plans that the deprived have gotten used to hearing. Fatima Al-Hassani reports.
Poverty affects a quarter of the Iraqi population. Extreme poverty is still one of the most prominent challenges the country faces right now. Despite the decrease in the number of poor people from 12 million in 2005 to 7 million in most recent years, many families are facing bitter challenges while trying to secure their daily food.
We
are living under harsh conditions. There's no aid, no electricity, no water. I live off the dumpster. My clothes are from the dumpster. We don't have flour. We have nothing. No water. I'm ill, but I don't have money to see the doctor.
We don't have land, we don't have a breadwinner. I have 10 daughters and no son. We look for anything to help us survive.
ومن المشاريع المهمة التي تبنتها الحكومة العراقية منذ عام 2010.
One of the most important programs adopted by the Iraqi government in 2010 was a strategic plan to reduce poverty. Its goal is to fight poverty and improve the living standards of the poor within 5 years. The Ministry for Women's Affairs is one of the ministries responsible for the program's success through a series of projects that were revealed at the ceremony for the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty.
Meanwhile, in the country of wealth and affluence, residents of the holy city of Najaf are still living below the poverty line. They live in tin shacks, just like their counterparts in other Iraqi cities. The citizens demand the authorities grant them their deprived and stolen rights. Rala al-Karawi reports.
Their homeland was taken away from them. They built their homes from ruins with tin sheets, palm tree leaves, and bamboo, which will hopefully protect them from the hot summer and cruel winter. From dawn to dusk every day, they search for anything with value, piles of garbage that they can exchange for food to stave off their children's hunger.
Where can we go? We don't have shelter. These tin shacks are all we have. They don't even protect us from the rain. When it rains, it pours down on us. What can we do? We all need help. Where else can we go? I don't know.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.